Hi everyone, welcome to our December AMA session. Thank you for joining us. My name is Andrew Schultz. I'm the community manager here at RentPrep. I'm also a real estate broker in the state of New York with over 14 years of experience in the property management and rental property industries. Just double checking here to make sure that we are live and we are recording. Things look good on my end. I am joined today virtually by Ashley from our marketing department. She's going to be helping me by monitoring the live chat and adding in any questions as we go on. But we do also have a ton of good questions here. We actually pulled some questions from the Facebook group, the RentPrep for Landlords Facebook group. As always, we also do these on a monthly basis and give people the opportunity to submit their questions ahead of time, which you can do via the RentPrep for Landlords Facebook group. Just watch for the post to pop up on a monthly basis. You can ask your question. It can even be anonymous if that's what you would prefer. And we try to answer as many of those as we can during these AMA sessions. We also have some questions that were left over from last month's AMA session that we're going to try to get to as well towards the end of this month's show. But it is just me this month. Last month I was joined by Steve White, the CEO. Unfortunately, he was unable to join me again this month. So you're going to be just drawing from my experiences, but we do have a lot of good questions here, and I think that everybody will be in really good shape. Let's see, a couple of housekeeping items here before we get things started. I do want to take a minute here. It is December. It's time to be thankful, and I wanted to mention a few people in the RentPrep community who have made life a little bit easier for maybe you guys as RentPrep community members, as well as inside the organization here for me. The first two people I wanted to thank are Josh and Ashley from the marketing team inside RentPrep. Josh and Ashley have been very, very supportive this year as we have grown the podcast as well as grown doing these AMA sessions and started producing more content for YouTube and things of that nature. Marketing team over at RentPrep has been absolutely fantastic this year. I wanted to take a quick opportunity to thank both Josh and Ashley. There are also two other people that I want to thank specifically with regards to the Facebook group. Joey inside the RentPrep community, Joey inside the RentPrep staff, helps coordinate all of the membership and things of that nature inside the Facebook group. We'll touch on that more in just a second here. But the other person that I wanted to highlight is Dan B. Dan is one of our most active moderators in the Facebook group. He's in there every day. He has a ton of great industry knowledge, and he's in there contributing on a daily basis as well as helping us to moderate the Facebook group, which, as I'm sure you can understand, is not always an easy task with over 13,000 members. So before we jump into the actual questions today, I do want to give you a little bit of an update on the Facebook group as well. We added actually this year, I just ran the stats right before hopping on this AMA session. We added a total of 862 new members to the Facebook group this year, which might not sound like a lot for a group the size that we are, but I wanted to tell you that that's 862 members against a total requests of 2,800, almost 2,900 total requests. We only approved about 30% of the people who requested membership into that Facebook group. And the reason for that is because we want that group to remain a well-curated group of industry professionals, landlords, housing providers, appropriate vendors, things of that nature. And we really do go to a good length to make sure that we're only allowing in the people into that group that belong in that group. So if you're watching this, chances are it's because you're a member of the RentPrep for Landlords Facebook group. We do thank you. Last but not least, I wanted to thank all of you. I don't remember if I did this at the start or not, but I do want to thank all of you for watching the videos, watching the AMAs, listening to the podcasts, sending us your messages, commenting on our stuff. It really does help us to get a feel for not only if we're doing a good job or not, but the types of content that you want to see most inside this community. This is your community after all, so if there's a video idea or a podcast idea or someone that you want us to interview or a DIY project that you want us to do, let us know. We're open to all sorts of different stuff, and we want to bring you the best content possible in 2023 and beyond. But as I was saying, all of this is because of you. If it wasn't for you guys supporting RentPrep, using us for your credit and tenant screening needs, there would be no RentPrep for Landlords podcast, there would be no AMA sessions, there would be no RentPrep Facebook group. So thank each and every one of you for helping support this organization through your continued patronage. Obviously, we provide tenant screening services here at RentPrep, as I'm sure you're already aware of. If you're not, check us out today over at rentprep.com. But if it weren't for you guys, we would not be here. So thank you from the bottom of our hearts. All that said, I think it's time to start jumping into some questions here. We're going to start with this one from Dayani. Is it okay to communicate with tenants through text message? I apologize. You guys are going to see me sipping a lot of water today. I actually have 3 glasses of water over here. I've got a little bit of a tickle in my throat, and I'll try to mute myself if I have to cough or anything like that, but just bear with me. That's all I ask. So Diane's question, is it okay to communicate with tenants through text messages? And I would say that the answer to that question is yes. We communicate with our tenants via text message. As a matter of fact, our property management software AppFolio has a specific area. Basically, every tenant has their own tenant page that we can go in, and that's how we access their ledger and put in maintenance requests and things of that nature. But it also allows us to text message the tenant back and forth, including the ability to send and receive picture messages, which is incredibly useful, especially when you're trying to diagnose a maintenance issue or something of that nature. It's incredibly useful to be able to text back and forth. So I would say it's 2022. We're going into 2023. Pretty much everybody knows how to use text messaging. I would not hesitate to use text messaging for your tenants. That said, make sure you set some limits with your tenants. Let them know, hey, if it's an emergency, don't text me, call me. That's a conversation that we have to have with our tenants all the time, because they'll send us an emergency maintenance request at 11 o'clock at night on a Saturday. Guess what? That goes to a computer system in the sky. It's not going right to my cell phone. So like, if they don't call our answering service, if they don't call our office, which is where they'll get the 24-hour guaranteed phone gets picked up through the answering service, then it's possible that we won't catch their emergency until it's, way, way, way past when they initially reached out. So I would say, yes, you can definitely talk to your tenants via text message. Make sure you set some limits so they understand when you are and when you are not looking at your text messages. And the other thing I would mention is, if there's a conversation that needs to be had verbally, don't be afraid to have that conversation verbally. Text message is a great way to follow up on something, a great way to confirm a conversation that you had in person. Basically say something along the lines of, hey, per the conversation that we just had, these are the 3 points that we agreed on. If you disagree, let me know right away. And put it in writing and send it to the tenant, and then that way at least you have a written record of a verbal communication that you may have had right there while you were talking to them. Excuse me. Hopefully that answers your question, and we're going to jump into the next one, which is actually also from you. Can we evict if the contract says no cats or 1 dog, and any cats or more than 1 dog are found during the inspection? So basically what you're talking about here is a violation in your lease. And for a situation like this, what you would want to do is issue out a notice to cure. So this is going to vary from state to state. Every state's going to be a little bit different. And actually, I guess I should probably back up and give our little disclaimer. You are watching a licensed real estate broker talk about real estate. That said, I'm not your licensed real estate broker, and your local team of professionals, your attorney, your real estate broker, your property manager, your accountant, are all going to have a better idea of what your unique situation is than the guy talking to you from the internet. Always run any piece of advice that you get from the internet through your local team that understands your situation before you take any action on it. Never just trust somebody, whether it's me or any other talking head on the internet. Never just blatantly trust somebody's advice without having it reviewed by some sort of a professional that understands what the rules and regulations are in your area. So going back to the question, talking about notice to cure here, every state's going to have a little bit different rules as to how notice to cure works. But essentially what a notice to cure is a document that tells the tenant that, hi, I'm your landlord. I'm aware that you are in violation of your lease. This is the lease clause that you're in violation of. You have until X date and time to correct it, or we're going to begin the eviction proceeding. And what I like to do is when I send the notice to cure, I will also include a relevant portion of the lease. So for instance, in this particular instance, you're specifically calling out a cat and a dog that don't belong at the property. I would actually take their lease and highlight the section of the lease that talks about whether or not animals are allowed on the site at the apartment. I would send that to them highlighted so they understand exactly what it is that they're in violation of, so that they know what they need to do to correct it. The other thing I would do is, if you have photo evidence of them being in violation, such as seeing the cat or the dog in the window, getting a picture of it, something like that, waste in the yard is another common thing. I don't hesitate to include those photos so that they know that I'm not bluffing, and yes, I do know that this is actually a situation. You do need to deal with this. This is not something that's just going to go away, because we are aware that it is an actual problem. So hopefully that answers your question there. And we're going to go ahead and jump into our next one. This one comes to us from Pat. We have remote check-in. If a guest sends a statement that their party has read and agrees to abide by house rules and good neighbor policy, and that they would be responsible for any sort of county citations of up to $1,000 and face possible eviction if any rule or ordinance is broken. As the owner gets the creations in our county, I'm going to assume that means that was actually supposed to say citations. As the owner gets the citations in our county and is made to pay the fines, would the statement hold up in small claims court? So I'm going to try to pull up a copy of our lease here while I'm talking through this, because we actually have a clause in our lease that specifically deals with being a good neighbor and not breaking the law. And we have that in there because we want people to be good neighbors, obviously, first and foremost. But let's see here if we can find that section of our lease. Speaking of, let's see here. There we go. And let me just double check to make sure we're set up to jump over to desktop mode here. We are. Okay, so desktop mode here. So this is actually the clause that we have in our lease that revolves around, dealing with law enforcement agencies and that sort of nature. Tenant is responsible for paying all violation fees issued against the house by the city, county, state, or federal governments for noncompliance to the appropriate laws. If the landlord is required to appear in court, the tenant shall pay an additional $350 fee to compensate the landlord for his time, in addition to any other applicable legal fees. And then we have a clause in here, specifically the city of Buffalo loves to write tickets for garbage cans, so we put this in all of our leases as well. The City Department of Inspections completes random neighborhood inspections each season. They frequently issue violations for such items as leaving garbage at curb on non-collection day, did not shovel within 24 hours of snow, and things of that nature. Tenant must, at tenant's cost, promptly comply with all laws, orders, rules, and directions of all governmental authorities, property owner associations, insurance carriers, or board of fire underwriters or similar group. Tenant may not do anything which may cause an increase in the landlord's insurance premium. If the tenant does, tenant must pay the increase as added rent. So that is our clause on having basically something in there such that tenants are responsible for any sort of violation that's caused by them as a result of their tenancy. And we've used it a couple of times. We've used it in situations where tenants have had exactly what I mentioned there. Tenants have left garbage cans at the street for too long after the garbage is picked up. That's a $75 ticket in the city of Buffalo, as silly as that sounds. But we use that clause to backbill that charge to the tenant. We've also used it in circumstances where a tenant is keeping a particularly dirty yard, where they're basically like leaving stacked up debris, car parts, things of that nature. Again, if we get fined by the city, we turn around and put that fine back on the tenant as part of their tenant ledger, and they are required to pay that. So would that statement hold up in court? Would that statement be considered legal? Again, this is going to depend on the laws in your state, possibly even in your municipality. And realistically speaking, whether or not something is going to hold up in court will more than likely wind up falling on whatever judge or arbitrator you get on the day that you wind up in the courtroom. But I hate to say that, but I've literally seen judges play it fast and loose when it comes to the letter of the law here in the state of New York, especially in eviction court, where the law is very clear and says one thing, and a judge will decide to grant a tenant more leniency or whatever the case may be, simply because the tenant tells a good sob story and the attorney or the judge feels bad for them. So as much as I hate to say it, in a lot of instances, when you get into, especially in small town courts, it seems, not so much in some of the bigger municipalities, but especially in small town courts, it really seems like the judges have a lot of discretion as to what they do and do not allow. As to whether or not that clause would be legal or not, you would want to talk to an attorney about that. But we definitely include it in our lease, and we've definitely used it on more than one occasion with some results. So I would say it's definitely worth getting something in your lease to make sure that you have some coverage there. On to our next question. This one comes to us via Joni. Is it typical for a property management company to charge the landlord 25% of the first month's rent for tenant screening? They then start charging the 8% monthly fee that same first month, in addition to charging the landlord a $195 fee to start each new rental agreement. Seems like double or triple dipping. So I have to be kind of cautious as to discussing fee structure. Not that you can find our fee structure on our website, and you can certainly call my office and I'll walk you through our fee structure. It's not hidden, but there are a lot of like antitrust matters and things of that nature that you can get into when talking about different fees and stuff like that. We're not going to get into all that. It's a much longer discussion than what we have time for here today. But I will say that our fee structure allows us to charge a fee, a 1 month's rent fee when we place the new tenant. And essentially that includes the marketing. So it does our photo set, the basic walkthrough video. If somebody wants a 360 virtual tour, that's an add-on that we sell. It covers the marketing, the ad generation. It covers all of the back and forth with people, getting them lined up for showings, covers us doing all of the showings, covers the lease generation, covers the move-in photo set. There's a lot that gets kind of wrapped up in that one overarching fee. I will also say that we do charge our monthly management fee the first month that the tenant lives in the property. So we charge our monthly management fee on top of the tenant placement because those are separate actions. Placing a tenant and managing a property are two totally separate actions, and that's why we charge those fees separately. You had mentioned that they charge you a fee for placing the tenant. They also charge you a fee for the tenant screening, and they're also charging you the monthly management fee. I would say that every property manager is going to run their business a little bit differently. Everybody's fee structure is a little bit different. I would say that the two fees that they're talking about, the tenant screening fee and the new rental agreement fee, that's all kind of added together in our larger fee for our tenant placement packages. But I don't think that anything that they're talking about there is unrealistic, to be honest with you. There is costs to screening tenants, as I'm sure you're all well aware. And you want to make sure that your property manager is getting you a good tenant. So obviously you want to make sure that they're doing the proper screenings, which costs money. So yeah, I would say that that makes sense. There's also a fair amount of stuff that goes into the actual lease up in terms of making sure the apartment's ready, getting a detailed photo set inside and outside of the cabinets and appliances, this, that, the other. There's a lot that goes into doing a proper move up. And if your property manager is doing your move ups properly, I would say that they're definitely justifying the fee that they're charging there. That said, I'm a little bit biased because I own a property management company. So take that for what you will, I suppose. On to our next question. This one is from Nuri. My friend uses a property management company to rent her house. Lots of property management questions today. I kind of like that. Her tenants have been there for a year. And so far, they've broken the garage door, the stove, the medicine cabinet, the dishwasher, and many other smaller items. She herself has been charged for the repair of these items, and her property managers are claiming wear and tear. As a result, she's received less than 30% of the rental income she should otherwise have received. My question is this: does she have grounds to fire her property management company prior to the end of her contract? What would be her argument for such an action? What is required to change property managers with an existing tenant already occupying the property? What are the tenant's rights in this situation? Her property is in San Rafael, California. So there's a lot of questions here. We're going to try to break this down bit by bit. Ashley, do me a favor. Don't cross this one off while I'm going through it here. Let's start with this top section. We're going to talk about the repairs and things of that nature and whether or not they're wear and tear. The answer to the question is, I don't know whether or not these are wear and tear items because I don't know what kind of condition the items were in when the tenant moved in. So something like a garage door, they have broken the garage door. Unless something failed on the garage door opener, I would think that that would probably be a tenant-caused issue, but again, I don't know. The stove, I have no idea. There's no information as to what happened to the stove. The medicine cabinet, so medicine cabinet, I would have an inside and outside photo of from the move-in, and I would know if the medicine cabinet was in a situation where it was due for replacement, and we would have replaced it prior to the tenant moving in. So the dishwasher, again, appliances are a crapshoot. An appliance can work great and then all of a sudden stop working. Dishwashers especially so. Many other small items. Property managers are claiming wear and tear. I think that the property manager needs to explain a little bit further why they're considering these items wear and tear and maybe provide some documentation. I'm not saying that the stuff is not wear and tear or is wear and tear. It's just more of a question of what was the condition of the place when they moved in. They've been there for a year. What was the condition when they moved in? And, you know, if they had older appliances, like an older stove, an older dishwasher, if they had an older garage door opener, there is a chance that some of that stuff is just aged out and failed. But that does seem like a lot of stuff all in one short period of time. As a result, she has received less than 30% of her rental income she should otherwise have received. Rental properties have expenses. That's a fact of life. Again, whether or not these are justifiable expenses, I don't know. But I do understand that, yeah, appliance repairs and things of that nature get expensive very, very quickly. Does she have grounds to fire her property management company prior to the end of her contract? So this is going to depend on the contract, and every property management company runs their business a little bit differently. For instance, our property management agreements are for a term of 1 year, but it's literally a 60-day walk away on either side. So if you decide that you don't like us as property managers, or we don't like you as clients, either side can walk away 60-day notice, and then that way we're not stuck with each other in a situation where there's animosity. If someone doesn't want to continue to engage my property management services, if they're unhappy for whatever reason, doesn't matter to me what the reason is, if they're not happy with our management services, there's no reason for me to keep them as a client. They're going to be unhappy. They're going to make our lives miserable. We're going to be unhappy because we're trying to manage property for a client that doesn't want us in their situation anymore. I would much rather part ways, shake hands. You never know if that person might come back down the road, and we've had that happen. We've had clients come back that have decided, I want to self-manage, I don't like what's happening. And we've had clients come back after making that decision and say, I understand why property management's important. So as to whether or not she has grounds to fire her property manager, I don't know. Every contract is different. I would say that you should probably, or she should probably have that contract reviewed by an attorney in the state of California that understands contract law and can kind of lead her in the direction that she needs to go. What would her argument be for such an action? Again, I think that her argument would be, if these repairs aren't reasonable, normal wear and tear, if this is tenant-caused damage and it's not being back billed to the tenant, I would say that that is a pretty clear indicator that the property manager is potentially taking advantage of the situation. And at that point, I would recommend talking to the property manager, or terminating the agreement, moving on, whatever the case may be. What is required to change property managers with an existing tenant already occupying the property, and what are the tenant's right in this situation? And again, this is in California. I don't know all of the laws in California, but I know that here in the state of New York, even if a property is sold, so it doesn't matter if a manager changes, property gets sold, whatever the case may be, the lease survives the sale, the lease survives the change of management, whatever the case may be. That tenant's lease is still valid and enforceable, even if somebody changes property managers in the middle of their tenancy. So I would say more than likely what you're going to want to get from the outgoing property manager would be a copy of the tenant's ledger showing all of the charges and all of the expense, or all of the charges and all of the income that's come in, so that you know where that tenant lines up. It should also show their security deposit on there. I would want a copy of the tenant's rental application if possible. Some property managers won't give that information up. I would love a copy of any move-in documentation, things like photos, walkthrough videos, the move-in condition sheet that the tenant should have signed off on when they moved in. All of that stuff is awesome, because that helps you when this tenant does move out to be able to kind of charge against their security deposit, even though the existing property manager or the property manager that placed them is no longer in place. That would be the stuff that I would try to get a hold of from the outgoing property manager prior to terminating that contract. The other thing I would mention is, this sounds like a communications issue more than anything else. Before we go terminating contracts and looking for new property managers and everything else, I think that a conversation needs to happen between this property owner and their property manager to just say, hey, what is going on? Why am I getting all these charges? Is this stuff actually normal wear and tear? Or is this stuff that the tenant should actually be getting charged for and you guys just aren't doing it for whatever reason? There is some stuff that you also cannot back bill to tenants. Again, I don't know in the state of California what the rules are with regards to what you can and cannot back bill to a tenant. I don't see anything on that list. I don't see anything on that list from my perspective here in New York there's nothing on there that would stop me from being able to back bill any of that stuff. So that's where I would be at on that. I think that this boils down to a communications issue first and foremost. Have her talk to the property manager, find out the who, what, where, when, why, and how of these repairs. And if we're still not happy with the answers at that point, maybe it is time to start looking for another property manager. So we are moving on to our next section. That was actually all of the questions that were submitted for this AMA specifically. Those are the ones that were submitted via the Google form that you can, again, you can find these every month in the Rent Prep for Landlords Facebook group. You'll actually be able to log in, ask your question. You can do it anonymously. And that's a nice way to get your question kind of at the top of the list for the monthly AMA sessions. We're going to jump into some questions that we actually pulled out of the Facebook group now. This one was asked by Frank A, and actually I added this one. Thank you, Frank, for asking this question. He wanted to be a part of the event, but he's got a doctor's appointment, so he'll be watching this after the fact. So Frank has a tenant in his 2-family apartment. He lives in the downstairs, the tenant lives upstairs. The lease said it would be for a man and his baby daughter. He moved in at one time 2 other children, so 3 in total, and the mother of the children. All 3 children have been taken from them by child protection for an unknown reason, but the mother is still residing upstairs. So this was supposed to be a non-smoking apartment from the application. He does not smoke, but she constantly smokes both cigarettes and marijuana. Frank has asthma and he's having a hard time breathing in the apartment downstairs. For the past few weeks, his eyes have been tearing up and he's having difficulty in breathing. The entire floor smells of cigarette smoke. So I have to open the windows and spray the area with Lysol. Can I evict them under New Jersey law for creating a health hazard for me, and how can I prove this? So this is going to be an interesting one. Again, I don't know the laws in New Jersey. You're certainly going to want to speak to a landlord-tenant attorney that's qualified in the state of New Jersey to kind of give you a little bit more insight into this question. In all of our buildings are non-smoking buildings, whether it be cigarettes, cigars, pot, whatever the case may be. We do not want people smoking in our buildings. That said, when you run a third-party property management service and you're not in the building all the time, it's very, very difficult to enforce that. Frank is in a very unique situation whereby he lives in the property and also rents the property out, lives in one unit, rents the other property or the other unit out. So he's aware firsthand of what's going on in this unit. My suggestion would be, first and foremost, you have 2 different situations playing out here. You potentially have an over occupancy situation because we don't know how many bedrooms are in the upstairs apartment. But they have added more people onto the tenancy than what was originally called for. And you have at least one person over the age of 18 living in the property that you haven't had an opportunity to screen in the form of credit and background checks and things of that nature. I would probably start there. I would probably start with a notice to cure by letting them know, hi, we're aware of the fact that you have someone living in your unit that's not supposed to be living in the unit, and we need that to stop. And I'm actually scrolling through my lease again because I want to pull up the section that we have that specifically deals with this. Bear with me as I scroll here. And there we go. We're going to jump over to desktop mode. And this again comes directly from our lease use. The tenant agrees to use the present premises only as a residence for self and those persons identified below. So at the top of our lease, and actually I'll jump up. What page am I on here? Section 10. So the top of our lease actually has spots for, we call these the responsible parties. Essentially, these would be the adults over 18 that are going to be responsible for making sure that the rent gets paid on a monthly basis. And then down here in section 10, this is where we would list non-responsible occupants. So this would be where we would put children, minors, non-contributing adults, things of that nature. That's where we would put additional occupants, if you will, is in our use section. So if a person not listed on this lease agreement occupies the apartment, an additional rent of $150 per occupant will be charged for such occupancy during each month or fraction of a month that the party occupies the apartment. All additional parties are subject to approval by management. By no means may tenant allow any additional persons to occupy the premises beyond limit proposed by law. The tenant agrees to assume all responsibility for actions taken by any person entering the property. Landlord will hold tenant solely responsible for all damages to property or for violations against this rental agreement. Immediate family may occupy the unit for up to 30 days without penalty. And we'll go ahead and jump back to the full screen mode here. And that's basically how we cover added parties to the tenancy. Like if somebody shows up in the unit unexpectedly, that's basically what we do, is we're going to issue a notice to cure based on that lease clause. We're going to tell them that anyone over the age of 18 needs to fill out a complete and total rental application just the same as anybody else. They need to be approved for occupancy in the unit, and they need to be added to that lease. And then any of the children, the minors and things of that nature, they would need to be added into our lease in the additional occupant section, in the use section that we had just talked about there. So that's what I would start with. I would start with that notice to cure. Now, assuming that the notice to cure has no impact, these people continue to live in the apartment as they have been, at that point, I would probably begin the eviction proceeding. They are in violation of your lease. They have extra people living in the home that are not accounted for, and that is a lease violation. So I would say at that point, yeah, you should be in pretty good justification to prove that, you should be in pretty good justification to move forward with an eviction stating that someone else is living in the unit. Now, you're gonna have to prove that someone's living there. The problem is, obviously they're not gonna change their address to that address, so it's gonna be a little bit more difficult. You're in a unique situation where you could perhaps have some sort of a camera that monitors the comings and goings of tenants in the property. I'm not going to get into all the legal specifics on that. We've talked about it in other episodes, and I'm sure you could dig that up. But realistically, I think that you should ask that question of an attorney as to how you go about proving either extra people living in the unit or having people come in and out, smoking. How do you prove smoking? Short of walking into the unit and catching an ashtray sitting there, or with used cigarettes in it, or literally having a photo of one of your tenants smoking in the unit through a window or something like that, it's going to be very, very difficult to prove the smoking thing. Again, not impossible, and I think that that's something that you can issue a notice to cure on as well. You could issue the two notices to cure simultaneously, I think, and then take both issues to court and let the judge decide. As I had mentioned previously, it sometimes is very, very difficult to get a court to see things in the way that you would like them to see things. And judges ultimately have a lot of discretion in the courtroom, especially when it comes to things like eviction cases and small claims cases and things of that nature. Do not approach an eviction in 2022 or 2023 without consulting an attorney. You need to have an attorney on your side in a situation like this. The fact of the matter is that in many states, and I don't know how the laws are in New Jersey, but I can tell you here in New York, the laws do not favor the landlord. They just simply put don't. Having an advocate on your side, and that's what your attorney is in this instance, is an advocate for you. Having an advocate on your side will help you. Having someone that knows all of the procedures to make sure that paperwork gets executed the correct way and things of that nature, that goes a long, long way in making sure that your eviction is as quick as possible. That said, not every attorney is a landlord-tenant attorney, not every attorney is an eviction attorney, and not every attorney knows what they're doing in real estate. Make sure that you vet your attorney, make sure that you understand what it is that you are trying to accomplish, and make sure that your attorney can actually get you there. The guy that does your real estate closings may not be the same as the guy who does your evictions, and that's okay. Might even be the same law firm, might just be two different people that specialize in different things. So definitely make sure that you're dealing with a real estate attorney that specializes in landlord-tenant law and understands how evictions work if that's the route that you wind up having to go. Good luck. I hope that that one pans out for you. I apologize. My throat's starting to get a little bit more sore as we go through here. We're going to continue to go, though. We're going to keep trucking right along until we can't talk anymore. So on to our next question from Caitlin. Do you give your tenants a Christmas card or a gift? And actually, I picked this one specifically because we don't do anything for our tenants for the holidays in terms of a Christmas card or a gift or something like that. But there's something that stuck with me, and the reason we don't do that is we're just simply scaled out. We at this point, we have too many doors where even a $10 gift card for every single unit would add up very, very, very quickly. So we're just at a point where it's not necessarily feasible for us to do that anymore. That said, there was something that a landlord shared with me a whole mess of years ago, and I apologize. I wish I could remember who it was. But they told me that the best thing that you can do for your tenant around the holiday season, rather than offer them a Christmas card, a gift, a bottle of wine, whatever the case may be, ask them if there's something in their apartment that could be improved that would make their life better. And for some tenants, this is going to be, man, I could really use a ceiling fan in my kitchen, in my dining room, or I could really use, trying to think of something else. I could really use brighter lights on the outside of the house, something like that. Essentially what you're doing is asking the tenant, what would make the biggest impact around the house for you? What would make this place more livable for you? What would make this house more sticky for you? What would get the tenant to want to stay here longer? And one of the things that you can do is improve the tenant's living situation. And if you think about it from that perspective, it's a win-win-win situation. Number one, you're going to get to improve the property. Number two, you're going to get to take a tax deduction for improving the property. Number three, you're going to be keeping the tenant happier because they're getting something added to the property that maybe no other landlord in the area is willing to do or has ever done. And it's going to make the property that much more appealing to them. They're going to want to stay there that much longer. So if you do have a tenant that you really want to go above and beyond for, or a tenant that you want to do something nice for during the holiday season, you might as well make it an advantage to both you and to the tenant in the form of doing something to the property that helps enhance it to make it better for them. And obviously the bonus to you is that becomes a tax deductible expense. So that would be my recommendation. Skip the crappy bottle of wine, skip the $10 gift card for whatever donut shop or coffee shop or whatever. Do something nice for the tenant at the property to make their home life a little bit easier. On to our next question. Does RentPrep work with any corporate housing? How do I go about finding an agency that would be willing to use my property for corporate housing in Maine? I'm currently 5 states away and would like to look into leasing it to companies looking to house their employees temporarily. So I know we've talked about this a little bit on a couple different episodes of the podcast. As a matter of fact, I know we have an episode of the podcast coming up where we talk about this specifically. Corporate rentals and insurance rentals and things of that nature. Unfortunately, I apologize in advance. I don't remember what episode that is. Ashley, if you happen to be able to, could you maybe dig around and see if I think it's in one of the episodes it's in post-production. I don't think it's been published yet. But we talked a lot about insurance housing and things of that nature and the kind of the pros and the cons to it. RentPrep does not offer any sort of housing, period. End of discussion. They don't do property management. They don't do any of that stuff. All RentPrep does is tenant screening, credit checks, background checks. They're not engaged in the property management side of the house at all. I own a property management company called Own Buffalo. I'm a real estate broker in Buffalo, but obviously I don't service Maine, so there's nothing I can do for you there. If you're looking for a property manager that does corporate housing in that area, my recommendation would be look at the National Association for Residential Property Managers, NARPM. You can go right on their website and search for NARPM members that are property managers in your area. NARPM is an excellent organization. They provide a ton of great knowledge, a ton of great education for property managers who are actively engaged in the residential property management space. And I think that NARPM is an excellent organization for any property manager on the residential side to join if you haven't already. There are some other organizations out there like National Apartment Association, but for smaller single-family residential, even small multifamily residential, NARPM is the place. Their conventions are amazing and things of that nature if you guys are thinking about joining. But that's a great resource to help you find a property manager that can help you with doing the corporate housing thing. That being said, let's talk about corporate housing for a minute. We've had very, very good luck over the years with corporate housing and with insurance housing. I'm going to paraphrase this down a little bit because, again, I know that we've have talked about this on podcasts and things of that nature. But it's a situation where essentially the company wants to rent the place from you, either to house employees temporarily, or if it's an insurance company, they're looking to house an insured that suffered a loss. Maybe their house burned down or whatever the case may be, but they need temporary housing. We've had excellent luck in these situations. I will tell you that typically most of these companies will come in, maybe not on the corporate rental side, but oftentimes on the insurance company side. They'll come in and say, I'm looking for a lease less than 1 year in length, but I'm willing to pay more because we want that shorter length lease term, that's a good negotiating point. Like, you can generally get additional rent for a short-term rental through these companies because they understand that at the end of the day, they're asking for a lot. They're asking for you to do something that's kind of outside of the norm for them. The other thing I'll mention is if you're in a situation where you can offer the rental in a furnished capacity. For instance, we tied in with a company in Rochester. They brought an entire household worth of furniture out, like an entire household. When I'll explain the situation. We had a corporate company call us and say, we need to place one of our executives. We need this guy to hop off of an airplane on Sunday night and be ready to go to work Monday morning, which means that he needs to essentially walk into a house that is turnkey ready to go. And that's what we did. He had walked in on a Sunday night. This company came in, they built out the living room, set up all the living room furniture, set the TV up, the beds were set and made. The refrigerator was set and ready to go. They supplied like the utensils, pots, pans, plates, everything. And we basically worked that into the rent and then also added profit margin for ourselves and things of that nature because, again, outside of our normal responsibilities, you need to be compensated for that. We came back to the company and said, this is what we can do it for. And they said, yeah, do it. They signed the lease and we were off to the races. We've had that happen with insurance companies too, especially in a situation where there's a fire loss, for instance, and you have a family that's temporarily staying in a hotel. They'll come to us and say, hey, we need a rental for the next 6 months for a family with kids. It needs to be furnished, blah, 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 blah. Yep, we can set that up. Give us 3 days to get the furniture and stuff in place, whatever the case may be. So yes, that is definitely something that you can do. I like doing it because it definitely pays better than your typical rental and it gives you the opportunity to generate a little bit of extra revenue. The nice thing is oftentimes corporate rentals are easier from a management perspective. They generally take a little bit better care of the properties as well than a typical tenant because they understand that they don't have to answer just to their landlord. They have to answer to their boss at the end of the day in a lot of instances. So if they wreck a house, their boss is going to hear about it and then they're going to have to hear about it at work. So I would definitely say if you get an opportunity to get into the corporate housing or if you get a phone call from an insurance company, definitely start looking into those. They're definitely worth looking into. We do go into more depth in the podcasts as to how to go about actually setting that up, how to write the leases, how to do the screening and things of that nature. Definitely check out that podcast episode. I want to say it's in the 390s, either 392, 393, somewhere in there. But you can find all of those on the website at rentprep.com/podcast. On to our next question from Finn. What is the best wording, short and direct, used to deny someone when they complete a rent prep? I'm going to restart this question. What is the best wording, short and direct, to use to deny someone when someone completes a rent prep credit check and it shows a low credit score and some sketchy payment issues? So what you are looking for is called an adverse action letter. I am going to pull up the adverse action letter that I'm using, which is actually pretty similar to the one that RentPrep uses. And I know that to be the case because we literally use the exact same document. I basically went and downloaded their adverse action letter and made a couple of changes to it. And now it's mine. Switch over to desktop mode here. And this is our adverse action letter. So this is the letter that we send out to any tenant that makes application for our apartments. I don't care if we run their credit and background check, if we don't run their credit and background check. If you make an application and are denied for whatever reason or don't complete your application process, you're getting an adverse action letter from us. It is a state law, or I'm sorry, I think it's a federal law. I wish I had Steve here to answer that question. But I believe that it is a federal law that if you are pulling someone's credit as part of their screening process, and then you do not accept them, and it's based on that information that you do have to give them the information as to where you pulled your report from, and also they can contact the report provider, in this case RentPrep, to get a free copy of their report. So again, adverse action notice, it's right up here in the upper right-hand corner, tells them what it is. Tenant's name and address goes here, date, dear so-and-so, thank you for your recent rental application. After a review of the provided information, we find that we are unable to accept your application at this time. If checked, this decision was based in whole or in part on the information provided to us in a consumer report or investigative consumer report prepared for us by a consumer reporting agency. Their mailing address and phone number are below. Fidelis Screening, which is RentPrep, obviously there's their office address and phone number. Fidelis Screening makes no part in the decision to take any action on your rental application and is unable to provide you with specific reasons for not accepting. You have a right to a free copy of your credit report within 60 days of receipt of this notice, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You can literally download this form free in the RentPrep for Landlords Facebook group. And again, it might be a little bit different because obviously ours has our address on it. But this is the adverse action letter that we use even to this day. And the reason I like that letter is exactly the reason that you mentioned, Finn. It's short and it's to the point. It's direct. When you're talking about tenant screening and you deny somebody access, you deny somebody's application, no one's ever happy when their application gets denied for an apartment. And they're more often than not, they're going to call and scream and, oh my God, you're discriminating against me and this and that and the other thing. I've taken the stance of, I'm going to say the absolute minimum that I'm required to say by law, and that's it. I'm not required to say, oh, your income didn't meet our requirements. Oh, your credit score was too low. Oh, your payment history didn't meet our requirements. All of our tenants see our screening criteria prior to filling out an application. And I know this because they literally have to sign off on our screening criteria prior to being able to access the application. So they have an opportunity to read our entire screening criteria guide before they ever apply for an apartment. So if they choose to not read that document and still apply, that's on them. It's up to them to make the decision whether or not they want to apply. We tell them what our criteria are. They should be able to know before they apply whether or not they're going to meet that criteria. And we give you all the information on the front end, so you should be able to figure out why you were denied. And more often than not, people know why they were denied for an apartment. They're just trying to get a rise out of you. They're just trying to get a response. They're trying to get something where they can get that I gotcha type of situation. And my recommendation is just don't give it to them. Give them the bare minimum that you have to. Give them a well-worded adverse action letter, which meets your requirements legally, and don't specify anything above and beyond that if you don't have to. It serves only to harm you by speaking any more than you have to speak in a situation like that. Take that for what you will, but that's how we treat things. We don't disclose anything more than we absolutely have to in those situations. All right, on to our next question from Linda. When you live 8 hours away from your rental property and hire a contractor to do some major repairs, but then after 2 months, your contractor has only done demo work and nothing is completed, what do? You probably have to fire that contractor. If they're 2 months in and they haven't gotten anything done other than demo work, chances are it's time for a conversation with that contractor to say, hey, what's going on? Why hasn't any work been done? I wish I had more information on this question. And the reason I say that is because I would be curious to know if there was a contract signed, what the contract stipulated, if there were completion dates that were worked into the contract and things of that nature. But I guess the best advice that I can give to you, considering you're 8 hours away from the rental property, is if you're going to hire a contractor and you're going to try to manage the work remotely from 8 hours away, you need to have crystal clear communications with that contractor in terms of what is expected, when is it expected of them, and how does that relate to them getting paid for doing the job. So for something like this, it sounds like you're probably doing a pretty substantial upgrade to the property. I'm guessing this is some sort of a gut and remodel or something along those lines. If the same vendor is going to be doing multiple chunks of the job, you should have in the scope of work basically phases is how we break it out, is different phases. And we've done this on residential rehabs. We've done it on some commercial jobs and things of that nature. And essentially what we do is we look at the job and we figure out, okay, what are the natural stopping points in this job? Like for instance, if you're doing a demo and a rehab, the end of demo is a natural stopping point because that's when the next group of contractors, either your framers, your electricians, your plumbers, your HVAC guys, once everything is opened up, that's when those guys are going to come in and start doing their work. So from scoping a job and from breaking it down into phases, demo phase, once they complete demo phase, I would say, okay, that should be time for a draw. And then they should be getting ready to start their next phase or jumping into their next phase. And when they meet the milestone of that phase, that's when they would get their next draw. And that way you control the job by controlling the money. Somebody's not sitting there with $20, $30, $40, $50,000 of your money in their pocket while you're wondering, hey, what the hell's going on here? So that's the best thing that you can do. It doesn't even have to be when you're 8 hours away. It could be literally any size job. You really have to monitor what's going on and tell the contractor, I want to see before and after photos of what you're doing. So if you're gutting a room, I should be able to see, oh yeah, here's the room with the old walls up. Here's the same room gutted down to the studs. I know that this work was done. I can pay you on this work. That said, managing something from 8 hours away is going to be nearly impossible. Like if it's not a situation where you're doing a lot of project management, you don't have the systems in place, you don't have the trusted resources in place at the property that you're going to be rehabbing, trying to do something like this from 8 hours away is going to be incredibly, incredibly difficult. My recommendation would be find someone that can manage this project for you or find a property manager that can manage this property for you, because being 8 hours away means that you cannot handle the day-to-day management of this property. Literally, you can't handle the day-to-day management because for you to drive to the property would take you 1 business day. So I think that in this situation, you probably are going to have to let this contractor go. You're probably going to need to get a new contractor in place. I would recommend getting either a project manager or a property manager in place as well, just so you're not running into these issues. Hopefully that works out for you. That's a tough one. Always make sure you vet your contractors before you have them go in, and always control the funds. Make sure that a contractor is not sitting there with a big pile of your money that they can just spend at will, ripping through materials, ripping through labor costs, and then they come back to you and, the job's going to cost more, whatever the case may be. You really have to have a very clear scope of work broken down into phases to make a job like that work. Next question from Ron. I have great tenants that have been in my place for 4 years. They don't wear shoes in the house. They keep everything clean. However, the rent is now $700 a month lower than market. What should I do? I really want to keep these tenants. I almost just flipped over backwards. I really hope that there were a lot of people watching the stream to see that happen. I hope there were a bunch of people watching to see that happen, and I hope a bunch of people get to watch that in the replay, because we don't edit these. These things just go out live. A lot of our content is like that. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but a lot of our content, we don't like to have an overly produced feel for the podcasts and stuff like that. So if you're listening to a podcast and you hear me flub up and it was left in there, it was left in there because a lot of times we want it to feel like you're listening to somebody that's, having a conversation. We screw up once in a while when we're talking. So we lean back too far in our chairs and almost fall backwards every once in a while. So hopefully you guys got as much of an enjoyment out of that as I did. What was I talking about? Ron's tenants. Ron is now $700 a month below market on his apartment, which is a bad situation for Ron to be in. I recommend that you always keep your apartment at market rent. And the reason I say that is because rent control is an issue that is popping up in more and more states and more municipalities across the country. I think California is completely inside rent control now. I know at least several cities are. Los Angeles, I know, is rent controlled. New York City has rent control, but most of the rest of New York State doesn't. However, there were ballot measures that were passed that will now allow each individual municipality in New York State to make a decision as to whether or not they want rent control in their area. There's a bunch of requirements that they have to meet, and I don't remember all the ins and outs of it, but the fact of the matter is that rent control is something that is happening. It's happening in more and more locations around the country, and I think that we're going to see more and more of it as time goes on over the course of the next few years. If you're in a situation where you're $700 below market value or $200 below market value, you are in a bad spot. Many places limit the amount that you can bump rent on a yearly basis. For instance, New York has some restrictions on that, and it's unfortunate because being $700 below market rent, if you're in a state that says that you can only bump your rent up by, say, 5% per year, 5% of 700 or 5% it's going to take you a long time to make up your $700 difference. 5% at a time is kind of what I'm driving at. So if you're not in a state where you have a situation like that, if you're not in a state where the rent bumps are controlled, my recommendation would be do what you can to get the rent bumped up to market rent as quickly as possible. I understand that you don't want to lose these tenants. Perhaps you can have a conversation with these tenants and say, listen, we need to bump the rent up to market value. Taxes have gone up, carrying costs have gone up, maintenance has gone up, et cetera, and have a conversation with them and say, we're going to bump it $350 this year, we're going to bump it $350 next year, and then you're going to get market rate adjustments going forward, or whatever the case may be. Don't blindside your tenants with it. Have a conversation with them. Let them know that, hey, this is coming down the pipeline. Yes, it may generate an artificial vacancy, a vacancy caused by the bump in rent. But at the same time, if you vacate that unit and do whatever the necessary repairs are to get it turned over, you're now going to be able to rent it for $700 a month more than what you were going to be able to rent it for previously. $700 on a 12-month basis is an extra $8,400 a year. How many years would it take you to pay for your turnover costs? Probably not many. I bet you it's under one. Most of our turnovers come in sub 5,000. Unless you're doing a major rehab project or something like that, I bet you that $8,400 would pay for your turnover cost and get you a new tenant at the higher rent, even if this unit turns over artificially by you upping the rent on this unit. I never love bumping the rent large amounts on people. It sucks. I've had it happen to me back when I was a renter, and I've had to do it to tenants, and it's never a fun situation, but you need to understand, first and foremost, this is a business. And you need to make sure that your business can cover its expenses now and in the future. So being $700 under market rent is an incredibly dangerous position to find yourself in. Definitely jump on that and get the ball rolling there. Make sure that you have that squared away. All right, where are we at on time? I think we're going to take one more question. We'll try to make it a quick one here. Let's see. Having a disagreement with the husband. This one comes from Tiffany. Having a disagreement with the husband on one of our properties. The rent is due on the 1st, but no late fees until after the 5th. We have a tenant who does not pay until closer to the 5th every month. One time they were a week late and paid the late fee. My husband wants to start an eviction every time on the 3rd of the month, and then I talk him down. I manage the properties, and he tells me when I'm doing something wrong. How would you handle a scenario like this? This one is pretty straightforward. So I'm going to use the example of being here in New York State. Rent's due on the 1st. We cannot charge a late fee until the 5th. Rent is considered late on the 5th of the month. That's when we can charge our late fee. And at that point, we can issue our 5-day notice and our 14-day notice to start the eviction process. So I would say that you should charge your late fee the first day that you're allowed to charge your late fee. I would also say that you need to issue notice to that tenant the first day that you're legally allowed to issue notice to that tenant. And I think that that means that I'm siding with your husband on this one. I'm sorry if that's the way that that one goes. But here's the reason that I say that. A tenant can always make a rent payment. Right up until, in the state of New York, even right up to the day of court, the tenant can bring their rental account current and end that eviction process at any time. All they have to do is write a certified check. You, on the other hand, as the landlord, have timelines that you need to follow, and those timelines don't start until you start the process. So what do I mean by that? 5-day notice and 14-day notice. You have to issue those notices, and then you have to wait the requisite 5 or 14 days before you can take the next step in the process, which is retaining an attorney, filing the eviction proceeding, things of that nature. If you wait until the 15th of the month before you file your 5 and your 14-day, you're now all the way to the beginning of the next month before you can start your eviction proceeding. So essentially, you're just pushing your timeline further and further down the road, is what I'm saying here. You don't want to do that. You want your timeline to be as truncated as possible because you want to get control of that asset back as soon as you possibly can. So for that exact reason, I would say issue your late notice, issue your late rent fee as soon as you're legally able, and issue that notice the first day that you're legally able. And for that reason, exactly, you want to make sure that your timelines are staying as tight as possible. Again, the tenant can always come back and pay. They can always pay that eviction off, bring their account current, but you're the one who's going to be at a loss for every day that you delay, every day that you wait. Hopefully that answers your question. There was no state listed on that one, so I kind of gave a little bit of insight for the great state of New York here. Hopefully some of that knowledge will be applicable to you in whatever state you happen to be in. We're pretty much wrapping things up here. It looks like we've been live for just over an hour at this point. Thank you all so much for watching. These AMA sessions are a lot of work. I know Ashley puts a lot of work into getting the questions ready for me. I put a lot of work into hopefully coming up with coherent answers for everyone and not falling out of my chair while I'm doing it. Thank you for bearing with me today with my scratchy throat. I appreciate that. I know that we're coming up on the end of the year here, so I do want to take a minute to, again, thank everybody for supporting us, supporting RentPrep over the last year. I also want to mention that now is a good time to do something nice for someone, whether it be a tenant, whether it be someone in your family, whether it be a family member, a friend, something of that nature. Go out there, do a little bit of good for somebody. It will pay itself back in leaps and bounds. From all of us here at RentPrep, thank you for making 2022 such a great year. We're looking forward to seeing you in 2023. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and we'll see you real soon.